This video was originally recorded October 2018 at the annual Dr. Nida program held at Menla Retreat and Dewa Spa in Phoenicia, New York. To learn about annual Tibetan medicine programs, please visit tibethouse.us and menla.org.
Amrita. You know, like this medicine Buddha is holding this in his bowl. He's holding Amrita, it's called, which means deathlessness. It's an elixir of immortality. That's what reality itself is. It's not like you have to make one. You can. But the reality is the deathless mixture of immortality. And so that's why he smiled, Buddha. And then people got confused because then he said, I can't really explain it because it's beyond dualistic concepts, beyond words and concepts. But it is not beyond experience. I've experienced it. I know, and you also, not only that, but I know that you know that too. Actually, another lady today that I saw today, she had a skiing accident where she almost died, and her father too, both survived it. But she had an out-of-body thing. She had a death experience kind of. And she was talking about it today. And she had told me the story before, and I asked her to tell it again because there were some other people there who hadn't heard that, didn't realize that about her. They thought she was just some sort of social lady, you know. So I asked her, tell them about your experience. And so she told again, and this is what I really liked. When she was caught in a skiing accident where she went down a 200-meter chute, like a ski jump, but all out of control. You know, like she didn't mean to go on the jump. She was skiing and got caught on the jump with her father also. And they were going like this. And he nearly died, and she had to be resuscitated and so forth. And she said during a certain point of all this whirling around and the skis being ripped off and leg broken and so forth, she said suddenly her consciousness was 200 yards above the whirling body. You know, she went out of body. And she was in a totally blissful state. And she makes movies, so she said the camera focus, suddenly a huge camera focus arose in reality like that. And she felt totally blissful. And she felt also that she knew everything. She realized she would survive, but she actually didn't want to, because she was suddenly in such a bliss, and she saw the bodies were getting broken there. And she didn't want to. She wanted her dad to survive, but she didn't care about it. She was at that state that people get in near-death experiences or post-death experiences where they don't want to go back. You know, if you know the literature, it's fairly common. But what I really liked about it, I'd heard the story from her before, and it's how I got to be friends with her. But what I really liked is she said, at the time that I suddenly was in that experience, I perceived that everyone else was already in that experience also, that everyone knew everything, and everyone was in that bliss, she said. Everyone, dead, alive, throughout time. And I hadn't heard her say that before. And she couldn't be copying me, because she doesn't read heavy-duty Buddhist books like, you know, Gyulama, you know, or something like that, you know, by my choice. She doesn't read those kind of books. I've given her copies, but she doesn't read it, I know. But I was so pleased because, you see, that's the difference. That's why Buddhas are useful. Do you understand me? And this is very important to know, because gurus can also be useful. You know, like big authorities can be useful. But the difference between them, a big sort of authoritative, you know, bossy type guru, and the Buddha, is that the bossy type guru has a big experience of something, not Buddhahood, but some kind of special experience. And then they feel that other beings don't have that and haven't had that. So then they feel superior to those other beings. And therefore, when they get a little deluded, they think the other beings should be their servants. You know, they think the other beings should give them like a Rolls Royce, you know, or you know, whatever, you know, some kind of service. You follow? They act like high and mighty, because when they look at you, they think you don't know. Poor thing, you know. And they think I'm superior. It's inside they think that. So their usefulness is limited, because in a way they enclose the student in a state of ignorance, which they presume the student has. Whereas a Buddha has, like that lady, this experience, which she had just, flickering on the edge of death, where they see everyone is already completely made of clear light. Complete light. There's a particle, there's no particle, it's all infinite. And everything is just bliss. And at the same time, that's their wisdom, that's their knowledge. But at the same time, their sensitivity, because they feel merged with all the beings, they feel the Dharmakaya, when you have a Dharmakaya, that means you think your body is all reality, and that all reality includes all the other beings, completely. So you feel you are all, it's just like if you were sitting there and you're, like me, you were enclosed inside your skin and your sensory apparatus, you're listening to me, but and if I was to rock the roll music, you might be transported by that. But otherwise, you're still enclosed inside your own, of course, body and senses. But imagine if you suddenly thought you were everybody in the room. You felt you were. You weren't even particularly mainly inside your skin. You were everywhere. You suddenly felt. That'd be very confusing, wouldn't it, at first? And a Buddha is like that infinitely. So the sensitivity of the Buddha, which becomes the compassion with that wisdom, realizes that the beings that are all made of that bliss have convinced themselves that they are lacking bliss. They don't have enough. They need some more. They're like, in fact, isolated, alienated individuals with everybody else doesn't realize how important they are. So don't pay enough attention to them. So they don't have enough love and affection. And therefore, and also other beings might want to harm them or do something, so they're frightened of everything else. Right? That's ignorance. Right? So the Buddha, but my point is this, the Buddha then becomes the servant of the beings. Doesn't think the being should serve the Buddha. He doesn't need service. Sees himself as everything is blissful, perfect, and all the beings are already blissful, perfect. Buddha has to do that, or they'd break their bodhisattva vow. Right? You got that? Because his vow is, I'm not going to be free of suffering until everybody is. So they have to see them all at their deepest level of sort of tissue, subatomic, pure light, energy. They're all just made of bliss. Every single one of you. The shoulder joint of every one of you, including my slightly aching shoulder joint, needing cupping. It needs cupping, always. It's actually made of bliss, even though it hurts me because of my ignorant way of relating to it. So a Buddha wants to serve the beings. That's the really useful teacher. So they then know the beings already know everything. So they know that Buddhahood of the beings is all going to happen for the beings. But they know that they can do whatever it takes. That then the emanation body of a Buddha is whatever manifestation each being specifically needs to be able to replace, to critically, slowly heal themselves of that ignorance of not knowing their basic bliss. But that's very different from sort of trying to make a basic bliss that you don't have. You follow me? Do you know what I mean? If you're basically a miserable thing, and really fundamentally, and then somehow you have to unrealistically run off someplace and find nirvana somewhere, or get a special guru, or take some medicine, something, and then you'll have bliss. But if you have the bliss inside yourself, and you have to remove your failure to understand what you have inside yourself, then the Buddha is very usefully there to help you do that. Do you follow me? Is that okay, Ginlam? Am I okay? Is that cool?
I fall asleep.
What? That's fine. Actually, you're like, although my son Gandhan doesn't quite agree. One time we had a Dharma school, in California, and one famous Zen master came and gave a great talk. And there were some Zen students from another monastery who were not students of that Zen master. And they all fell asleep. And my son was very mad at them. And he said, why? That's so rude that teacher was giving a great talk and you fell asleep. And he said, oh, no. That's a great compliment to a true master, that whatever they say doesn't disturb their sleep, which is connected to Dharmakaya, which is connected to death, and the Dharmakaya is like a higher consciousness, sleep. So they told, and my son Gamdan, he wouldn't buy that. He would say, no, that's an excuse. He said, you're using, I'm not saying that to them. He said, that's an excuse. He said, what I would be impressed is if one of you, or even the Zen master, could give that lecture while being asleep without waking up. Then I'd be impressed. He said, so he set a very high bar. and actually we did meet a different Zen master a little later, who unfortunately passed away very sadly because he didn't know how to swim, fell in the water. And he fell in a lake somewhere. But he was a great person. I liked him very much. But he used to talk. He would say, I think I see Tibet like a giant Christmas tree. And instead of ornaments are hanging beautiful monasteries with lights, candle lights, offering lights in them. But he says it so slowly that he more or less falls asleep. While you're waiting for him to say, instead of ornaments on the tree, I see. So he was a wonderful, I liked him. Okay, I'm sorry. So then I take, therefore, you're taking a rest as approval. So, because sleep, dream connects to body of bliss, sleep connects to body of enlightenment, of reality rather, Dharmakaya, ultimate reality. And death, which connects also to death. So that's why it's deathless, because death is eternal life. So it's clear, it's merging with clear light, which means being everything. And that being that everything is bliss. And it's strange, but we can't really explain it except we can say certain wonderful and intriguing things. If the universe is a unlimited field, infinite field, and eternal field of infinite bliss, then that means it's completely quiescent in itself, because since it has infinite blissful energy, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't need any more anything. So on its own, it doesn't do anything. But beings who may feel not yet Buddhas connected to all of it, there's no limit to what they can draw from it if they need anything. Which of course is definition of love. Love is, something that wants you to have whatever you need to fulfill all your need, all your desire, all your, your pain, healing, whatever, bliss, in other words. You follow? So we can say logically, even though if we don't make it personal, we can say that ultimate reality is love. Because it's a bed of energy that is inexhaustibly giving of itself to anything that needs anything else. Something that knows it's one with all of it doesn't need anything, so Buddha doesn't need to give to himself. But Buddha gives embodiment, that's the body of emanation, the waking state, right? Waking state, body of emanation, compassion. Sleep state, body of reality, infinite energy, clear light, wisdom. And then bliss body in between, dream state, is bliss body. Do you get it? That's the basis of the inner science. And it's a beautiful thing. And there's another beautiful thing. Maitreya, the future Buddha, in a certain book called the Uttara Tantra, the ultimate, in a way, continuum. Real meaning of Tantra is continuum. There's no cessation of anything, actually, continuum. And unexcelled continuum, or ultimate continuum. And in that book he says, we don't say there's one Buddha, and we don't say there are many Buddhas. He says, because we don't say there are many Buddhas, because all Buddha's Dharmakaya is indivisible. So when you become a Buddha, you realize you've always been one with every being that's ever been a Buddha, and since the past is beginningless, infinite, eternal, in the backwards, then that means you infinite numbers of Buddhas, and you are one being with them, and you're all one with all the future ones. Because the time also doesn't bother you. But then they say we don't say there's one though, because each person who becomes a Buddha gets to enjoy being one with all the other Buddhas in their own particular way. So they bring their own sort of continuum from all the other beings they were engaged with, and this and that. So we don't. So each person enjoys being Buddha. It's not like your enjoyment just becomes everybody's enjoyment. You have your own specific type of enjoyment. Like somebody wants to be a medicine Buddha, somebody wants to be a Ngakpa Buddha, somebody wants to be a female Buddha, somebody a male Buddha, somebody an androgynous Buddha, somebody a non-human Buddha, a divine Buddha, demonic Buddha. Different beings can manifest infinite different forms. So therefore, I had a student of mine who became very arrogant, but he's very smart. And he says to me, "Oh, Bob, you should give it up about the inner science." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Buddhism has no science." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, why do you say that?" He says, "Well, in Buddhism, in what Buddhists think is science, there's no theory revision." Because somebody gave him a definition of contemporary science as well as changing your theories. Every theory is a hypothesis and changing it. So I said to him, "Oh, I see. So Buddhism can't be science because it's not based on ignorance." That is, contemporary science is based on that no science will ever succeed in knowing what reality is. And then he ran away because he didn't want to be more refuted, which I was about to do. Because Buddhism does have theory revision, and precisely because Buddha said, "I know everything now, I experience it. Experimentally, I know it. But it's not formulable in a formula or a theory or an expression, or I can't describe it in that sense where you can conceptually understand it." So therefore, any way I would conceptualize it to try to help you open your mind for your own experience of it would only be useful in a certain context. It would not be an absolute dogma. You follow me? So in a way, it's always revisable. Every description of something that's indescribable by caveat ahead of time is always only convenient. It's only relatively useful and relatively true within a certain relative context, which is the same as the proper theory of science, where all laws of nature are only hypotheses awaiting falsification by further experience, by further evidence. You follow me? So it's actually the same, except the difference is that the contemporary person has a preconceived idea, which they pretend they are open-minded, but actually they are totally closed-minded. They preconceived the idea that they can't experience reality, and that no one ever can and never did, and there's no such thing as a Buddha. That's a dogma that they have. Whereas the Buddha has no such dogma. On the contrary, they have the encouragement. I mean, Buddha could be wrong when he says we can all experience, we're all going, not only can we, we're all going to be enlightened, he says. Some of us, like me, will take a long time, many lifetimes. Some of you maybe sooner. But, he might be wrong on that. We can't be sure until we are enlightened ourselves. But, so he's only giving encouragement. But it's a nice encouragement. It means that you should follow your own intuition and your good sense. For example, the fact that you can know very easily that nothing is nothing. So you won't go around believing in it or being afraid of it. Because you can't fall into nothing. Because it isn't there. Nor can you escape pain in nothing. So then you won't go for, opiates. Because you won't escape, because you'll never get to the permanent nothing. What do you think, Christiana? What do you think? Seriously. What? Silence. The silence of the sage. Actually, there's two good silences. You know, in the Vimalakirti Sutra, did you read the Vimalakirti Sutra? Didn't I give it to you? My translation. I did. It's really very neat. There's a thing where the monk Shariputra, you know, the Hinayana monk, he meets in Vimalakirti's house a goddess who was invisible there, but then she comes out. She shows her body. She manifests her body. Goddess, transcendent wisdom goddess, and she gets into conversation with him. And he said something about how long have you been here and all this, and she says, well, I guess I've been here as long as you've been enlightened. You've been in nirvana. You know, she says, because he's an enlightened arhat, in the dualistic way of having had an experience of nirvana, but not the Buddha's experience, but a dualistic experience. And then he says, oh, well then have you been here quite a while? He says to her. And she says, well, how long have you been in enlightenment, Shariputra? And then he doesn't say anything. He's silent. So then she says, Shariputra, I asked you a simple question. How long have you been enlightened? And then he says, well, it's your turn to answer. You're like a wise, very great scholar, enlightened being. How long? And he says, well, I couldn't say anything because you can't express anything about enlightenment. Nirvana. So then she says, well, Shariputra, don't point to enlightenment by abandoning speech. Nirvana is neither inside nor outside, nor anywhere in between. Similarly, syllables with which you speak are neither inside nor outside, nor anywhere in between. The very nature of syllables is nirvana. So you can't point to nirvana by abandoning speech. So I always ask my students, because I make them in my class read that book, because it's a very short Mahayana Sutra, so it's the best one to be an example. And besides, I translated it, I did a good job. So, no, people like it, actually. It's been very popular for the last 30 years, 40 years. And so this is very interesting. You see, he thinks that he has attained enlightenment. He thinks other beings haven't. And so he thinks he can't communicate this amazing experience he had. So he doesn't say anything. But in his mind, he's thinking of a state that he thinks they don't have any access to. You follow me? Perfectly illustrated in that. And she criticizes him for that. She told him, and he's a male chauvinist, so every time he falls short in his dialogue with her, he changes the subject. And the final one is a really fun one in that, the final subject change is where he finally says, you're really wise, goddess, you're so amazing. I really have to take my hat off to you. But tell me this, answer this question. Since you're so wise, like a Buddha almost, how come you're in the body of a woman? And then she says, well, I don't know what is the body of a woman. I never, why are you asking me that? Didn't Buddha say there's no male and no female ultimately? And she goes through a thing with him like that, and he's like, okay, yeah, I know what you mean. And then she switches bodies with him. She uses her miraculous power, teaching power, and suddenly he feels he's in her body, and she's in his body. And she says, Shariputra, how come you're in the body of a woman? And he says, I'm not really in the body of a woman. It's like a dream. It's like an illusion. I didn't make it like this. Because he really feels he's her. And he speaks in a loud, high voice like she did. And she's saying, Shariputra, how come you're a woman? And because she's looking like him. It's like there's a movie like that, where some kid goes in another body. There's a crystal skull from Mexico, and they do some mumbo jumbo, and then they start in another body. There's a Hollywood movie like that. And then she switches it back, and that's her way to teach him, But my point is, there's a later thing in the same sutra where Manjushri and Vimalakirti are having a conversation about non-duality, and 32 other bodhisattvas are there, and they all give some statement, and one of them actually is supposedly the previous life of Nagarjuna. His name is Sudarshana or Priyadarshana, Tonagawa, Tanatuk actually, literally, is his name in Sanskrit. And he talks about nirvana and samsara are not two, and that's non-duality. You know, so this is nirvana, in other words. And he said, everybody, Manjushri praises every single one. And then he says, what you all said was really great about non-duality, you know, which is the ultimate thing. But there's only one problem, which is that you said something, and you can't express non-duality. Then Manjushri, that's what Manjushri says. And then he turns to Vimalakirti and says, now Vimalakirti, what do you say? And then Vimalakirti doesn't say anything. Again, he's silent, like Christiana was. But then his silence, everybody who was there, then the sutra says, 80,000 beings were there, and each one attained a next higher stage of awareness. In other words, his silence was extremely liberating to them. So I always ask my students, what's the difference between the two silences? Shariputra's one, which is who thinks he's pointing to some inexpressible enlightenment, and Vimalakirti's one. And the right answer is, in Vimalakirti's case, he drops into Buddha awareness, and he sees everyone else as knowing already nirvana is here, and therefore he doesn't need to tell them that. So he sees them already in bliss, and therefore they feel seen in bliss by some awareness. They feel that awareness of it, and you can only see someone like that when you are one with them, when you feel you're indivisible from them. So they feel this special, they touch through that temporary enfolding in his field of awareness, their own deeper blissful feeling. You follow? Whereas Shariputra more withholds, because he thinks it's somewhere else, the whole thing, and they don't have it. They're just suffering, you know. He thinks because he's stuck on the Fourth Noble Truth. Isn't that cool?
Yes.
Do you feel your bliss? Anyway, you do if you read Dr. Nida's book, Bliss Book. Then you feel it. I really like that book. You know, I was worried about it, I confess. But in the first chapter, you scolded all the bad gurus who are like molesting people. You know, there's a way of misunderstanding this. We're all one, and I feel I'm everybody, and then as you go there and molest everybody, that doesn't help. Neither the molester nor the molested. It doesn't help. And you scolding all of them. Thank you, Gala. That is so excellent. And yet, you come up with some sweetness about bliss. That is really great. And I was truly impressed. This lady, whose name is Ruchira, the Indian lady who has this Apna Up organization that tries to help these sex trafficked young girls and women from Mumbai and everywhere, Delhi, every Indian city, to escape, and drop by drop she finds them. She also knew all about Wilhelm Reich.
Oh.
Usually people have forgotten. How many of you here know Wilhelm Reich, his work? See, not too many. It's like Buckminster Fuller, Wilhelm Reich. I'm a teacher and I often teach, crowds of students. And Fuller, Reich, and Ivan Illich, three of the greatest intellectuals of the 20th century, have been more or less forgotten by people nowadays. It's really sad. Wilhelm Reich's great book was, hold on to your hats, The Function of the Orgasm. But his definition of the orgasm is totally tantric, but he didn't know about Tantra. He used to like a reincarnation without knowing it. And his thing was that ordinary sex, following Freud, he was a disciple of Freud, direct disciple. And the ordinary orgasm is what they call genitally organized, and it's therefore procreative, kind of mainly, like the church says, you can only do it once to conceive one person, that's it, All those other extra sperms, I don't know what you do, they belong to the Holy Ghost or something. They have some crazy theories, because they always persecuted him, But he says that's what he calls, neuromuscularly armored, emotional plague-ridden sex. It's not genuinely satisfying sex. Genuinely satisfying sex, what he called orgastic, not orgasmic like I do, but he called it orgastic sex, is sex all in all of these chakras. is orgasm in the brain, throat, heart, navel, not just genital. Do you follow? It's because the whole inner nervous system is open, and it's not procreative, if you follow me. And his theory is that fascism and the authoritarian personality, and of course this is a guy who he suffered under Lenin, because in the early 20s he rushed to Russia, because at first Russia was supposed to be very open and it was going to be really great type of thing, that all the naive Marxist intellectuals thought so, before Lenin arrested all the yogis and everything. And then he had Hitler happen in Germany, and then he came here and got arrested for talking about orgasm. But what he means by it is that the couple is like a dyad, he says, the couple. And they get together, and there's no humping and pumping necessarily, much. And they're just together. And then if they concentrate and they stay together, then they will be enfolded by a blue light, and everything in the whole body will melt. And there'll be an experience of genuine, natural, he calls it, orgastic, like lenche, true orgasm, which is, and then there are what he called orgasmically potent, meaning they don't just have a little thing and then smoke a cigarette, Do you know what I mean? And wait till the pressure builds up again or something. Conventional. And then he was so persecuted that Freud got all freaked out with him. And he said he had the most beautiful understanding of posture and military posture. And what he called the emotional plague was where the males, particularly in the patriarchal cultures, are taught to have a rigid neck where they jam their chin down and shut down the throat chakra. They suck in the stomach and they shut down the diaphragm and the heart chakra. And they would retract the pelvis and they shut down the genital and navel chakra. And then they don't feel anything internally, and therefore they become brutal, which they're meant to. As soldiers, they're meant to kill. They beat up their kids in a family. They beat their wives. And they're miserable. And then he has this great pamphlet that he wrote, which is not his major psychological work, but it's called The Emotional Plague and the Murder of Christ. Because when they meet a person who's orgasmically potent, like a sadhu, siddha, or a nakpa, or somebody who's has inner streamings in their chakras, in their system, throughout their system. But they're not necessarily floating around all the time, but even that type of thing, there's a blue light even. It's blue, the light is blue. But he didn't know about the chakras, but he said that. And when they meet someone like that who has that authoritarian personality, someone like Pontius Pilate, in other words, and they're brutal, and they're also frustrated totally because they can't feel genuine relaxation and pleasure and natural oneness with their environment and the universe and nature, and a female or a male, depending if they have the same plagued neuromuscular armoring, as he calls it. When they meet someone who is not like that, what happens is, sympathetically by vibrations, they start feeling like some little energy inside, some little bit melting. They feel disoriented, and they feel threatened. They're going to lose control. They're like toilet training. They're, retraction of everything, and they're like fear of feeling. And then they subliminally know that the source of this threat to their armored, although miserable, but sense of powerful and controlled structure is threatened by that streaming person, and they then want to kill it. They want to destroy it. So that's what the murder of Christ. That's his. He puts it like that because he's in that culture. And I think that's a beautiful because it's clear the reason in this movie, in the discussion afterwards of these poor girls being shipped around, really horrendous stuff. It's the guys who buy this. They all have this emotional plague. You have to stop the market, to do it. The frustrated people. But then Reich is like every militarized culture is like that. Because the warrior has to be unfeeling to be able to kill. and to be willing to die and not to feel crippled by inner feeling of fear, and sensitivity, right? So it's such a brilliant analysis, and he doesn't know about Buddhism, but it fits totally with Ngakpa and inner science and tantric inner science, that is tantric abhidharma, I call it. Ngakbe, Sangagi, Lumbizu. Lumbizu is not just Tegmen. There's a Tegchen Lumbizu and there's Sangagi Lumbizu. The chakra said that this Sangagi Lumbizu. Meaning that's what the Sigmar about. Lumbizu. Okay, so that's a mouthful. Because I apologize that I missed a bunch of classes. And I'm happy to answer questions and discuss. And also, if Allah has anything more important than what I have to say. I'm just trying to provide a groundwork for what he wants to say, which is that this is based on knowledge, not just on feel good or dropping out or being hippies or being natives or being like cute Tibetans or whatever. It's based, and the Tibet, of course, they have their own fantastic thing, but they know that they are the guardians of the jewel, the super precious human jewel produced in the India Aryavarta, as they call it, the noble land of Buddha, that Buddha chose to manifest, Shakyamuni Buddha chose to manifest this amazing inner science on this planet, And the Tibetans know that they are the guardians of that, right? Right? Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava was the Ngakpa sort of patron, Hayagriva person. Om Padmasambhava home in the Guya Samaja is the root mantra of Hayagriva. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. It is. I was surprised. And from tongue of speech of Amitabha, comes from tongue. And so it's a wonderful thing. So they know that, And that's why His Holiness Dalai Lama, when he's in India, he keeps telling the Indians, it's not that I'm just some weirdo from Tibet. I am the heir of your great 17 Mahapanditas, and he doesn't mention Mahasiddhas, but to the normal Indian people, but he means them too. Many of them are same as the Mahapanditas, the great pundits of the great Buddhist universities, where the inner sciences were conducted throughout the European Dark Ages. They were flourishing, and then they were conquered by Muslims first and then by Christians second. In the second millennium, India was, but Tibet kept it. All the Siddhas went up there. And a lot of the Tibetans are the reincarnations of those great Indian Panditas and Siddhas. You know that joke of Jambaltarta, I told you, Gemma. Jambaltarta, the Geshe from, who died now, but he was a Geshe from Gandan. His students were really, very feeling devoted toward him late in life. And they said, Geshe, you're so holy and you're a great practitioner and such a model person and so loving, kind, and skillful and knowledgeable. How come you're not a reincarnation? And he said, well, I always wanted to be, but all the good ones were already taken. I told him that before, So, this Yuto Gyanden Gompo, this is Geshe-la. This Geshe-la. This is our Ngakpa. They say that I want to be everywhere where anybody needs healing. They don't die, you see. They don't need tenure. They just get reborn all the time. So they're all around. Wilhelm Reich was reincarnation of somebody, no doubt. But then he didn't have that knowledge but that would have been alien to people in Germany and Russia and in America in the 50s and 40s, they wouldn't have known what he was talking about. If he started talking about Tantra, they would have arrested him, probably. So he just did psychology, But he tried it. It's amazing. I was looking at it today on my phone in the taxi. I got an e-book. And he says, fascism is the natural, authoritarian dictatorship in fascism is the natural social model for people who are neurologically constricted like that. They will inevitably be brutal and they will be in a very authoritarian system. And democracy is only possible for people who've begun to open up their nervous system, So that's why in Soviet Union, yoga was illegal. Even Hatha yoga, they didn't know the other one. But, to open up your inner tensions and rigidities was illegal. You had to be tight and tense to be part of their industrial dictatorship. So we have not just the Democrats. Of course, the Democrats better all vote. But if we're really going to succeed in our democracy, everybody has to be a yogi in America. Totally. What?
We have a question here.
You have a question?
You take a question.
You do?
Yes.
That's great. Yes.
Hi, Dr. Thurman. Good to see you again. I was promised by the Menla staff, I won't name names, that you were going to go into a little bit about transmutation of rage and outrage. And I wasn't promised this, but the crossroads of feelings, a feeling of futility about not being able to control this environment. I feel bliss. I feel blissful. I'm laughing.
You feel good.
I'm listening to your stories.
And you knew that you would.
That's why I forced myself to do that.
James Brown. Yes. Please go ahead.
And I'll feel that bliss. And then the next moment, I'm feeling outrage over a situation that I'm dealing with in my life. And I'm trying to transmute that. I'm trying to,
Good.
But I was told that you were going to discuss a little bit about that, using that inner science to transmute those frustrations that I think so many of us are dealing with.
So you're outraged by something?
Yes.
The whole country should be outraged by the corruption of our democracy right now. But that should be channeled into voting in a jolly manner rather than anything else. Although you can be forceful, but the thing is that that outrage builds on outrage if it's based on anger. The problem with anger or hatred, especially connected with hatred, which usually is the case in case of rage, is that the action that you do to try to rectify the situation that you find outrageous is usually unskillful and has blowback and is done. They have studies that they say when someone loses their temper, 85% of their realistic judgment about the situation is lost. So they're only operating on 15% of good sense, and therefore rarely can they improve the situation. And so the diffusion of it is not just to suppress, but it is to try to not let it sweep you away. And actually, mindfulness is very helpful with that. And actually, males are socialized to blow up easily in a patriarchal culture, and that just promotes the violence. But females are closer to being able to have that net. So you have to learn from females, actually, in that outrageous situation. You have to try to learn from females. And they usually will have a better advice for you in that kind of situation. Like, no, dear, you don't mean that, and don't do that. And that's very important to do. Males are socialized to blow up too, but females, on the other hand, are socialized to be too polite for too long and listen to the idiot for too many paragraphs and then blow up later when they've lost their good humor and skill. So Shantideva's advice to the female is, be rude when you're still happy, and intervene, be forceful when you're still happy. And in general, that's the thing. So by being mindful, when you meet some guy on a blind date, and he immediately says he's very sympathetic to Mr. Kavanaugh or something, then you just go home right away and you say, well, it would be great to have a date and go to the restaurant with you, but I don't think I can really enjoy my food sitting with an idiot, and you take it easy and go study something, and in a good humored way, and just leave. And if females have to learn to do that. But if they wait and then they get mad at the guy and try to change him when they're furious, then it'll never work because of the fury. They'll not be able. They won't be skillful. It's like my wife always tells me, when I'm upset, she says, "Well, okay, you're upset, but why don't you shut up about it before I'm upset too?" She often says to me, and that's very skillful because she's still kind of not mad yet. And then I'm realizing, oh, why am I so mad? And then I calm down, But that's the female thing is like that. So good luck with channeling your outrage. But I think we all need to be outraged for another few weeks until we vote. Register now and vote then, and try to control this disaster. Because the problem with America is we have a lot of destructive machinery.
Yeah.
And if we behave badly as a country, if we put people in charge of that machinery in this country, it's very destructive to the whole planet. So we really have a responsibility to restrain, all our machinery, And those people who didn't vote for Hillary because they were brainwashed by the 40 years of Republican propaganda, or because they think her cheekbones look too much like a squirrel who has too many acorns in his cheek, or because whatever stupid reason, or because she isn't Bernie or something, they really did us all a misservice. And I hope they all go vote now. We'll have a 40 or 50% turnout in the by-election. And in that case, we'll be able to restrain the weirdos. And it'll be very important to do. I don't know. Gela, I'll tell you, I'm going to be quiet now. So before more questions, I think Gela should have a chance to say something. Can we hold a question just for a minute? Gela, do you want to say anything?
Probably we'll do tomorrow. Tomorrow we have the empowerment. And then
Which empowerment? We have dream yoga empowerment, or
Utah empowerment.
Utah?
But it's including dream yoga.
What is that?
Including dream yoga.
Including dream yoga.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
We have the transformation of ignorance, and then desire or attachment, then anger, and then pride, and then jealousy or envy. So I think that might help. We use mantras and different types of Buddhas, and then bringing the light or the wisdom from Utah, and it helps us open our chakras. So I call it empowerment or transformation.
That's wonderful, Gela. Thank you, Gela. That's a very good one. What he said is much better than what I said, in this sense. The anger, hatred, poison, that energy becomes ultimate reality, perfection, wisdom. Because if it's channeled like as a wisdom, anger sort of takes the situation apart. So at the deepest level, that it's connected to intelligence, anger, because it takes the world of suffering apart. It blasts it apart. And it reveals that the world is actually clear light and bliss. And that's the best channel for outrage. One should be outraged at samsara, and it should realized that it's nirvana. Thank you, Gela. That's wonderful. What time? We at 9:30 we start?
There's one more question.
Is that correct?
9:15.
So now, good. But then you had a question then. That was Gela's statement. Yeah. Maya.
Yes.
That means illusion.
Yeah.
And but also magic.
Yeah.
In the creative sense.
Yeah.
So we have something called magic body that is involved in this empowerment. That's very good. Okay, please, what's the question?
That's what the saint told me. So, my question is, the last time I was here was with you and Krishna Das, and at that time, Dr. Thurman, you did the jewel tree meditation, and that night, I had a moment of awakeness in sleep, in the sleep stage. So my question is, to either of you about sleep yoga, that's the enlightenment place, and would you, how to get to that sleep? Is that after the dream yoga? How does it happen when we move into sleep wakeness? And then
I couldn't follow everything you said, but you said you did Shine meditation? Is that what you said?
Jewel tree.
Oh, 2 or 3.
Jewel tree.
Oh, jewel tree meditation.
yes, Guru.
Oh, you did? Oh, great.
You led it.
And that
so
recording.
Powerful.
Oh, okay. No.
And somebody else said the same thing. They had a very powerful experience from your leading of that in
good.
person.
It's a beautiful thing, jewel tree. That's becoming insider. The jewel tree is the tree of refuge. It's all the enlightened beings, that are hovering around us, really. And the jewel tree is where we imagine them, because in our...
You guide that again.
What's that?
She wants you want.
We only have 5 minutes right now.
She wants to what?
Can you guide that again for 5 minutes?
Oh, sure. Oh, okay, sure.
Or 10 minutes.
Or 3.
No, because we thought we have to stop soon, actually. So So this is Menla, special Menla yoga actually, and it fits perfectly with dream yoga. But we always use this, we always teach this at Menla, and we always try to do it at Menla. And it's called Menla Sleep Yoga. And this is that, okay, before we do the sleep yoga, we will do jewel tree yoga, Menla jewel tree yoga, okay? So now you turn your attention, you go into meditative mode, breathe a couple of breaths. And you don't have to count them, just breathe them. And then calm down. And then turn your vision into looking into your own face to find out who you are. And then don't be in denial that you can't find out who you are. And then you sort of let yourself melt. Because you can't find the sort of solid thing inside that you feel is really you. You're like your face within your face, what the Zen people call your original face. You can't find that. Just quickly, right away, you just sort of let go your self-image, your self-narrative, and let yourself be open-minded that you're not sure what you are, where you are, as much as you can let go of your picture of everything. And sort of find that, let yourself feel that to be kind of relaxing rather than frightening. Because you can't just become nothing. So you can let go of whatever you're structuring yourself to be. So you sort of do a little turnaround like that. And after you do that, you then decide, okay, I'm not sure what I really am, so what I'm going to be now for meditating is I'm going to be what I might think of as an ideal meditating persona. So alert, open-minded, self-aware, receptive, and ready to reimagine the universe. And then imagine that all enlightened beings, Shakyamuni Buddha, or if you're a Christian, Jesus, or if you're a Jewish, Rabbi Hillel, or Moses, or whoever, whatever angel or God or Krishna, if you're Hindu, whatever you like. But for me, it's always Buddha. My great teachers, His Holiness Dalai Lama, is right there in a subtle body, a Maya body, a magic body, in the sky, like Obi-Wan in the movie, in the Star Wars. When he comes back after dying, he comes back in a luminous light body. And also everybody's there, whoever taught you, or you could ever imagine, whoever respected, whoever learned from, all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all Ngakpas, all your teachers, could be your parents too, whoever you feel benefited you in life, you learned from, and in history. And they're all there in these light bodies, in a great giant tree stretching up in the sky, or some of them are, sitting, floating on clouds, and they're all looking at you meditating, and they're thrilled that you are meditating and trying to find out your own higher self, your own higher being. And their smiles are gleaming and glistening with pure light. And they send rainbow light rays flowing down toward you like a cascade. And this light just fills you up. And if you're chilly, the emphasis is more on the red, warm light. If you're hot, the emphasis is on the cool, green and blue light, white light. Whatever light's good for you is the main one that shines on you, and then any sort of doubt and worry and darkness that's in you drifts away, and you feel buoyed up in clear light. Even clear light itself is kind of a grayish glass crystal transparency light. It's a weird light. It's a kind of kindling of the light that's within you rather than something that from outside that would cast a shadow. It's everything being self-luminous is really clear light. So, but anyway, you're in this field of blessing and refuge of all enlightened beings who are welcoming you toward an awareness of your own being just like them. A Maya body, a magic body, a pure light body, rainbow body. And you're feeling wonderful, blissful in every fiber, every cell, every tissue. And then in this wonderful space, in this ideal landscape, under the jewel tree, with the heavenly host of enlightened beings, loving beings, compassionate beings, all above you and around you. Focus your mind on your subtle, your coarse, subtle, and super subtle body-mind. And you sort of go down the stages of dissolution, and you let go your visual field and just see all this with your inner eye, your mind's eye, your Dharma eye. And then you let go of your hearing field, and you hear with an inner ear, and then you feel you're kind of in a misty place, and you sort of melt into kind of a smoky fog, and then you melt into kind of a moire patterns, or a swarm of fireflies, sort of a sparky thing, and then finally you come into kind of like a still, clear candle flame, and this is your way of letting go of the fire, of the coarse elements. And then you come into a white light space of pure luminosity, and this is the subtle mind. Now you've entered into the subtle body mind, and you're just a system of nerves, chakras, central channel, and drops of bliss energy, bindu, tiglis, and wind energies of circulating of bliss within your system. That's the body you're in, and you're in the white light space, boundless space. You are white light. The white, as you expand in that white light, it gets reddish, and you feel a warmth. And then the intensity of the brilliant sunlit luminosity that you are in, the field of that becomes a dark. You need a piece of being in the shade, in the darkness. And then in that darkness you don't feel frightened of it because you know there's no nothing, and you let yourself go with that, and you kind of go toward the edge of becoming unconscious, falling asleep. And this is what you do when you do fall asleep. But you project that you will not, when you do fall asleep, you will not stay in a dark space, but you will slip into the space of what you're really made of, your real deepest mind-body substance, which is clear light, transparency, this kind of glass crystal light where there's no shadow and there's no brilliance that would blind anyone, because there's no need for that, because there's no shadow and no darkness. And then you're in the bed of infinite energy, and there's no boundary. In a way, in the darkness, when you let yourself lose consciousness almost at the edge, you drop your boundary, which you do every night when you go to sleep. You become unbounded. You no longer have, your skin is not your boundary when you fall asleep. You merge with your pillow, your cheek. and there's no boundary between your inside and your outside, to the darkness of sleep and unconsciousness. But this is a different, it's beyond consciousness and beyond unconsciousness, and you are sort of boundless, and there's infinite energy, and all night long, this is the Menla sleep yoga now, so then all night long you're going to be lying in this clear light. Or put it this way, you're not going to be asserting your habitual awakening dualistic mind of not being clear light, but being like a bag of bones and flesh and blood and sense organs running around in an environment. When you're asleep, you just are this field of clear light. But you don't remember that. There's a boundary of unconsciousness between that awareness and your awareness of your individuated self. But when you're in clear light, you're also aware of your individuated self. As when you're, but it's like you're transparent to yourself. And you're also aware of all other beings. And it's transparent to them. And then, and the way you can play with that is then the dream yoga thing. And the dream yoga is where you come back into the black, red, and white planes of the subtle mind. But you don't go into embodying yourself into the coarse elements of the wind, fire, water, and earth. Motion, temperature, cohesion, and solidity. You instead, you imagine yourself in a magic environment, in the area of the boundaries of these three spaces of light, red, black, and white, around in that area. And you imagine yourself as one with, you talk in the Ngombo, or Medicine Buddha, or Hayagriva, or Tara, or whatever ideal form you may have become familiar with. So you go into a dream body like that, and in that dream environment you decide, I'm going to learn things that I didn't know before, I'm going to be lucid in this dream, I'm going to do good things for beings. In the dream you could save 1 million poor sex-trafficked teenage girls from Indian brothels, and you could install them all in a paradise planet far away from the weird perverts who buy them. And you could do that all in a dream without even worrying about the police, the corrupt police. And that's dream yoga, where you you will yourself to do meritorious things in a subtle plane, in a subtle environment, and develop your skill of doing these things and your sensitivity about doing these things. But the base from which you arise in doing that is the base of ahead of time projecting that when you're deep asleep, you're not going to stay in a dark space in which you fall asleep and surrender your separated consciousness. But you will slip from that dark space into this translucency and transparency space. And there you have infinite energy at your command. There you are in a bed of love, meaning blissful energy that wants to permeate every cell. That's why you feel good in the morning, even though you don't remember being there. So this is a version of, inspired by Menla, Ngakpa, Nida. Nida, his name, Ni means the sun, and Da means the moon. Yeah. And in a way, and those are this day and night. And that's sort of day and night. And clear light is both, permeates day and night. It's not like especially at night, especially in day. It's beyond the duality of day and night. Wonderful. It's a very great task that we all have since we grow up. We have grown up, even whether we're from Asia or from the West or East. Most parts of Asia are also authoritarian, neuromuscularly armored cultures, policed and militarized cultures. And we grow up being terrorized by authorities, religious authorities, political authorities. If we don't do this and that we'll be thrown in hell or thrown in prison or thrown in some suffering. We wrongly have an image of the sort of default. If you let it all go, we're scared to let go and be truly open, because we are conditioned to think that if you let go, control, a sensation or a habit of control, that something bad will happen to you. And we're not brought up in one of Buddha's cultures, especially the mainstream Tibetan Buddha culture. Used to be Indian, used to be Mongolian, but mainstream Tibetan one, which is where the default situation is nirvana. The default situation is, as the Nyingma says, samanta bhadra, kuntu sambo, total goodness. So to shift our sense of background reality, so that we don't think any longer that ignorance is bliss. We realize ignorance brings suffering and knowledge brings bliss. And therefore the reality, background reality, is bliss. Clear light, bliss, freedom, openness. So this gives a kind of faith and a kind of sense of trust. The basic trust, what Erik Erikson, the famous psychologist, who I used to like, I studied with him actually as an undergraduate, wonderful white-haired Swedish man, Erik Erikson. There was a first crisis of becoming a person was to have developed basic trust in the universe. And we are in cultures that teach you not to have basic trust in the universe, to be afraid, very, very afraid of the universe. So it's very, very empowering and healing and important for us to realize that it's like realizing that the basic reality of yourself is your health, even is the bliss of your being. Your health energy is your own bliss, and therefore the default is health. But anyway. So when you go to sleep tonight and you let go of your waking consciousness and you make a resolve to practice what Gela or whatever he's been teaching last day or two about dream yoga, making that dream meaningful, making it lucid, making it beneficial, it's against the background of the totally good Kuntu Sampo, Samantabhadra Buddha, or Mrs. Samantabhadra Buddha. All good, total goodness, Mr. and Mrs. Buddha. You're in their embrace. They have you protected and cherished and loved and comforted, and nothing bad can happen to you. Then you use your dream to learn, cultivate your wisdom and compassion. And then you feel great in the morning. Ding!
This video was brought to you in part through the generous support of Tibet House US membership community and viewers like you. To learn more about the benefits of Tibet House membership, please visit tibethouse.us. Thanks for watching. Tashi Delek.